Hi, my name is Shannon Finck and I'm faculty in the Department of English. Devising an adequate response to the demands of a changing climate necessitates the collaboration of separate spheres of modern thought, including the humanities. Theorist Bruno Latour suggests cross-disciplinary storytelling as the place to begin to move beyond narrowly focused crisis management and mitigation plans toward an Anthropocene politics. Latour contends, it will be utterly impossible to tell our common geo-story without all of us, novelists, generals, engineers, scientists, politicians, activists, and citizens, getting closer and closer within such a common trading zone. Concurrent with trends in literary and interdisciplinary studies, my literature and writing courses for the past several years have focused on aspects of the Anthropocene, the geologic period in Earth's history marked most significantly by human impact. The prevalence of these themes has made my classes fairly popular among STEM field majors and minors, so I've done some tailoring to suit the needs of that population. For example, by asking students to practice reading texts grounded in the professional practices of STEM disciplines, from accessible popular works to journal articles packed with complex data, or by offering students the opportunity to support their written arguments with primary research. But the Anthropocene is also quite literally a human problem that will ultimately require humanist thinking to address. As we shape our environment more and more to our detriment, showing no signs of reimagining the planet in any image other than our own, it is this generation of students who must be prepared to apply their knowledge, their ingenuity, and their empathy to such challenging prospects as widespread food insecurity, mass climate migrations, global public health crises, and resource wars. Somehow, we must prepare them for all of this without seeming moribund. So that's one goal with which I've tasked myself when designing courses and assignments. Be realistic, but don't make it an utter bummer. Talking and thinking about the future should be exciting. Scholars in literary studies often ask what role storytelling plays in shaping climate discourse, past and future. What narratives about progress, people, or markets, for instance, led us to the threshold at which we now find ourselves? Or conversely, what narratives have the capacity to help us avoid ecological collapse, envision and innovate sustainable futures, or to find ways to thrive even as these crises unfold? In his book Anthropocene Fictions, Adam Trexler argues that anthropogenic climate change has transformed the capacities of recent literature as much as it has the global landscape. Contemporary novelists such as Lydia Millett, Nathaniel Rich, Paolo Bacigalup, and Richard Powers, for example, bear out Trexler's thesis in fiction that ruptures genre conventions and deploys formal innovations in storytelling form as a means of reflecting drastically altered human horizons. One of the challenges of such fiction, known collectively as cli-fi, involves figuring out how to represent the interpenetration of the planetary and the personal. My current research explores the relationship between human-plant interactions and strategies for passive resistance in contemporary environmental writing. So, for example, theorist Katriana Sandilands notes the shifting connotations of the verb to vegetate in its application to various life forms. She contends that when humans or animals vegetate, especially persistently, they are considered alive, but not quite fully. When plants and other non-animal organisms do likewise, they are considered abundantly alive, perhaps even excessively so. Meditating on the vegetative, however, muddies the gulf that divides animalia from plantae. Vegetating for humans and animals involves a turning inward, but not a turning off. It may look like a checking out, but rarely warrants an unplugging. Sandilands argues that vegetating humans are neither reduced to the inertness of vegetability, nor are they simply being passive. Rather, their activities and affects are consistent with the vegetal. They demonstrate self-sustenance, subtlety, or rhythmic temporalities. But while slipping around in the semiotics may allow us to feel the pulsing vibrations of our plant selves, our common enactments of liveliness, it will not enable us to become more plant-like, nor does it guarantee that human society will value the plant-like within us. Attending to the vegetative processes of human consciousness uncovers the ways in which people and animals are increasingly organized and controlled like or even as plants under neoliberal biopolitical regimes, where their growth, reproduction, and movement are surveilled, regulated, and restricted. In other words, a zoocentric ethics would have us elevate humans above plants, but we are routinely and unequally exploited, manipulated, subjugated, and eradicated in the polis in the same ways as plants, as beings that produce, reproduce, spread, and yield, or don't. We can also protest like plants to some degree. The talent of plant life lies in the way it encrypts itself, as Michael Marder puts it, by presenting itself in the guise of passivity. But plants, like people, move and are moved in response to certain events and conditions. They are, likewise, capable of organizing their movements toward a common thriving in what Marder calls the vegetal democracy open to all species. I think today's students have grown up in a period of increased public concern and greater transparency about the threat of climate change. They've seen many examples of grassroots, youth, and indigenous climate justice movements, as well as new climate-focused legislation. So they have ample reasons to be anxious about their futures, as well as some reasons to look forward with hope. This year's Inflation Reduction Act, in particular, has the theoretical potential to generate a boom in green industry, which will shape students' employment prospects in ways we can only begin to imagine. At the same time, Gen Z is tired of all the dithering, as well as all the familiar scripts about personal responsibility and consumer ethics, and they should be. They need and deserve new scripts for living and actionable climate policy that will help them make sense of their experiences and give them a sense of purpose as the conditions for life itself promise to degrade. I think art and literature can do some of the work generating these new scripts. In my classes, we talk a lot about diversified local efforts to mitigate environmental problems, rather than the impossible, overwhelming focus on coming together in a global sense. If you need to feel immediately involved, there are plenty of ways to help address environmental issues right in our own communities here in Atlanta. Wild Nest Bird Rehab, the Amphibian Society, Trees Atlanta, and Concrete Jungle are all good local conservation organizations looking for volunteers. But also, people tend to think of climate change as a science issue, and thus may be beyond their depth. But it's really a lot of issues: a social justice issue, an urban planning issue, a public health and policy issue, to name just a few. If the study of literary history and the history of narrative allows us to see how people in the past made sense of the difficult features and challenges of their present moment, then the study of contemporary literature has the capacity to help us through this pivotal moment.